City Council to order for Tuesday, March 4th of 2025. Misty, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Curler,
Here.
Ms. Schmager,
Here.
Ms. Quidno,
Here.
Mr. Fields,
Here.
Mr. Waters.
Here.
Thank you.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next agenda item is council member board reports and acceptance of meeting minutes. We have quite a few minutes from last month's council and a number of board minutes. Are there any questions or comments on any of the minutes?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, we will accept all of those into the record. Next is correspondence. So, Michelle, let's start with you.
Well, I didn't have a whole lot to report on as far as communication, but I did have a lovely telephone call from a constituent.
Great. Great.
Nothing to report.
Mary?
I have received the library weekly news and had one correspondence on the water level order.
Great. Steve?
Very similar. I had the updates on the Fargo Library and a update on the Rock Lake improvement, and then one phone call from a constituent also.
Thank you. I had also had some correspondence on the Rock Lake water level order. We all received, council members received a thank you note from Judge Gruber. We got correspondence on our new city website, which I know Drake will be talking about. And then I had a chance to attend one of the presentations about the library expansion plans. And I know there are 2 more scheduled for later this month, so people will still have an opportunity to learn more about that before the April 1 referendum. Okay, thank you. So next is our public comment period. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment tonight? I'm not seeing anyone in the room or online, so I won't bother reading the whole paragraph unless we have someone who wants to speak. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone interested in public comment tonight, so we'll move on to our city manager's report. Welcome back, Drake.
Thank you. Handed out a sheet to you right before the meeting. I'll have the clerk upload it to the agenda later. The website did launch. The forwarding issue has been fixed, so if someone is going to the old domain, for now it will forward to the new web address. It was announced on social media as well. There is improved functionality associated with it. I believe it is easier to navigate. It's certainly more mobile friendly. In the coming weeks or so, it will become the main way that we schedule. So both the community center room scheduling as well as fields, shelters, other rentable items, which will it should be better for the consumer as well as for staff, particularly when you're trying to rent a space. Only the available times will be shown to you instead of needing to reach out to a staff member, inquire about a time, have them check a calendar, and then report back to you. So a lot of it will be more automated. We'll continue to take advantage of any other functionality that we may be able to use with it, but so far, we haven't received much feedback, but it's been mostly good, so we're looking forward to continuing with that. The MOU that the council approved at the last meeting was executed, so it has been executed by both parties. There are some numbers on building permits that have been issued across the 4 municipalities we provide building inspection services to. We have begun a process of updating and modernizing our IT infrastructure. This includes transitioning to Office 365 government accounts, which are more secure servers, improved antiviral and security software, as well as updated backup hardware and software. So that will continue throughout the year and ongoing. A reminder, in-person absentee voting for the April 1st election begins on March 18th, so it'll be March 18th through the 21st, and March 24th through the 28th. Horizon Manufacturing, a company in our business park, is beginning construction of a over 46,000 square foot expansion. So we're excited to see that project move forward. Build out of Brookstone Phase 8 has begun. So as you recall, all of our infrastructure was installed and build permits have started to be issued and homes are going up. So we continue to experience strong demand in our housing market. We are continuing to trim during the dormant season. I spoke with Director Schreiner, and by mid-April, we're on track to have trimmed approximately 800 trees. And then we'll also be have plantings of over 150 trees planned for the planting season as well. And they are also increasing public outreach in the forestry department. They'll be hosting a seminar with the 4th grade class at the Lake Mills School District. And then through a program with the Wisconsin DNR, each one of those 4th graders will receive a sapling to plant when they take it home. I don't have many meetings listed. I was on paternity leave. My schedule will likely be part-time and intermittent moving forward. Perhaps a chunk of time taken in the May time period as I need to for daycare purposes, childcare purposes. So I am back. I may not be 5 days a week always, but I am here. If I'm not around, Chief Schroeder will be responsible for any city manager duties if I'm unable to be reached.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Any questions for Drake? Michelle?
With the expansion for the Horizon business, that's a very large facility. Are they going to be adding more jobs?
Yes, I cannot recall the number.
Okay,
It's a multi-phased expansion, so this is just the first part of it.
that's wonderful. Oh, and one more thing, sorry. I am so excited that my 4th grader is going to be getting a tree, because I remember those days, and my other child didn't get one, and so I'm excited for this, because it's bringing back some awesome memories. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda is, sorry, let me just scroll down here.
Council business.
Yep. So our next item on the agenda is council business. The first item there is Resolution 25-12, which is our Arbor Day proclamation. I think that's the title, so I probably don't need to have Misty read it. Can we maybe just hear from Director Schreiner briefly about Arbor Day, and then someone can make a motion. Sorry, I didn't give you a heads up so you could walk over.
Thank you very much. As Drake said, we're excited about celebrating Arbor Day this year, and we're taking a lot of advances to hopefully recognize that the community can see the importance of Arbor Day. This is a requirement to receive the Tree City USA status. That's something that we've had 33 consecutive years with our first growth award in 2023. It's a goal that I will strive to have this department achieve each year. One of the requirements is an official proclamation or recognition of Arbor Day within the governing body, being you guys. But excited to see this program grow. I think having the 4th graders participate in such a program with multiple different organizations is fantastic. And I see it just kind of as the infancy for recognizing Arbor Day within the community. Any questions at all? By the way, Smokey the Bear will be attending the
Fantastic.
Bonus.
4th grader presentation and seminar.
And a sapling, all right.
Hopefully, the Lake Mills leader will be there for pictures.
See about that, but thank you very much for recognizing it. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion on Resolution 25-12?
I'll move to approve Resolution 25-12, the Arbor Day proclamation.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Quidnow, seconded by Ms. Schmager. Would anyone have any discussion or comments? Okay, seeing none, I will read our Arbor Day proclamation. Whereas Arbor Day is observed throughout the nation and world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource that provide us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas the City of Lake Mills has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation for the past 33 consecutive years and desires to maintain this status, now therefore be it resolved that the Lake Mills City Council does hereby proclaim the last Friday in April as Arbor Day in the City of Lake Mills. And we urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and support the city's community forestry program. And we urge all citizens to plant trees to promote the well-being of present and future generations. So, Misty, would you please call the roll on Resolution 25-12, which is our Arbor Day proclamation?
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item is Resolution 25-13 regarding alcohol consumption in Commons Park. Misty, would you read that title for us, please?
City Council Resolution 25-13, approving the request of the Sons of the American Legion and authorizing alcohol consumption in Commons Park for the 2025 Town and Country Days.
I'll move to approve City Council Resolution 25-13.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Waters and second by Ms. Quidnow. Would people like to hear some remarks from Director Schreiner? We do have a memorandum, and this has been for a number of years an annual approval. Does anyone have any questions for the director? No? Okay, then let's please move to a roll call vote on Resolution 25-13.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Our next item is Resolution 25-14 regarding wastewater treatment plant. Misty, would you read that title for us, please?
City Council Resolution 25-14, authorizing the city manager to execute a facility planning task order for the wastewater treatment plant project.
Thank you. So this resolution has two options to it, so I think it'd probably be best to turn this over to staff to go through the background and the options for us before we have a motion. Drake, should we just go right to Travis, or you want to kick it off?
Sure, we can turn it over to Travis. The only thing I'll note is you did receive an email, I believe on Monday, for a request that kind of outlined past action, past recommendations, and where you could find them. So I hope you all received that. And if there's any questions, we'll try and answer them, but I'll let Travis kind of fill you in on where we're at and what our next steps look like.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Travis.
Yes, so there was a memo prepared by staff that outlined, or provided an update on the status of facility planning. If you recall from December, I visited and presented on the various options, just to provide a refresher on that. Option one is to remain at the existing treatment plant site with continued discharge to Rock Creek. The option two is to remain at the existing site, but move the outfall to discharge the effluent to the Crawfish River. Option three is construction of a new treatment plant site on a brand new site outside of the city on a new location. And then option four was looking at regionalization where a new treatment plant would be constructed near Jefferson. And it looked like in our evaluation that the option 4, regionalization with Jefferson, would be the highest cost option. So there was not direction to proceed with evaluating the regionalization alternative in greater detail. And I just want to clarify, really, the decision tonight comes down to what I consider two main options: staying at the existing site or going to a new greenfield site. And although we have separated the staying at the existing site into two options, option 1 and 2, making that decision tonight does not lock you in to moving the outfall at this point. If you were to make the decision tonight to remain at the existing site and phase in improvements, the timing and final decision for moving the outfall to the Crawfish River could be made at a later date. There's nothing that we would be doing in an early phase in upgrading the existing site that would lock you into moving the outfall later or preclude you from doing that. Really, what I would recommend doing is to continue to evaluate the regulations. As we all know, that they're changing on a yearly basis, so that once we do get closer to a phase 2 timeframe for continued expansion and improvements, you could reevaluate the benefits versus the cost of pumping the effluent to the Crawfish River. But we would outline the pros and cons of that in the facility plan that gets submitted to DNR, so it's on their radar that is being considered. The primary driver right now for moving that outfall is phosphorus limits. And just a reminder that the city, it has been granted into the multi-discharger variance, which is not a permanent variance, but it does buy the city several permit terms for meeting phosphorus compliance without moving the discharge over to the Crawfish River at this point. So I'm happy to answer, questions that you may have thought of since the last time I was here, or provide any further clarifications that I can. But tonight we would be looking for direction on how to proceed with the facility planning, either to phase in improvements at the existing site or to proceed with looking at a brand new treatment plant. And that's why there's two task orders on the agenda, one for at the existing site, one for the new site, just so that once a decision is made tonight, that we can kind of hit the ground running here and proceed with facility planning. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Travis. Are there any questions? Mary?
I have a question regarding the AGS technology that is I believe, the primary technology as the point of consideration for staying on the current site. And I recall the Public Works Board took a tour of a facility not far from here, likely going on 2 years ago.
Yep.
And I'm curious to know if we've had any further discussion to ask the question, now that they're 2 years further in, or X amount of time, I might be off on my timeline, might be a little sooner or later, but would they still highly recommend it? Did they uncover any new risks or issues or concerns that we should be aware of before because that's, I believe, really lumped into the stay on the current site decision. It is current site and it is AGS as the primary or only solution at this moment. So I'm curious to know more about AGS's, our viewpoint on AGS as moving forward.
Sure. Yep. That's a great question. I guess I'll start with just a clarification that in the first phase of any upgrades at the existing plant, we would not be proceeding with adding AGS at this point. Okay. The bottleneck, if you will, at the plant right now is more just getting the flow through the plant versus the loadings. So right now, the ditches, the oxidation ditches have capacity for the loadings that are coming in, the biological oxygen demand, the, TSS, phosphorus, ammonia for treating those types of things. The more of the constraints right now are just the peak flows, being able to pass those. So for the AGS system, that's more of a strategy to meet future increases in loadings. Like if a big heavy industry were to come in to the city, that would be a strategy for dealing with those higher loadings. But you are correct that was being strongly considered for future upgrades when needed because of the tight footprint that's on the site. And that was one of the main benefits of aerobic granular sludge, is that it's able to fit into a tighter footprint, which is highly beneficial. And there have been more and more of those types of plants being constructed. We're monitoring and continue to evaluate that process very closely. They are performing well. Nothing has changed since that evaluation that would, give cause for concern that that's a viable technology. If anything, now there are more installations online that can be used as references. And certainly when we look forward to future phases, they'll have a solid 15 to 20 years for some of these plants of operation that we'll be able to look back on and say, okay, is this a viable technology to use at the existing site?
So as a follow-up then, so the rate impact comparison that we're looking at states phase 1 and 2 at existing wastewater treatment plants. So is phase 1 bring us to a place of, a place that puts us to an advantage to where we're at today as far as growth, whether it's low or moderate, and then what is phase 2, and then what is this particular comparison of the rate impact then, is it relating to, so I'm clear?
Yeah, so the comparison there, it is apples to apples as far as the amount of wastewater that's able to be treated. The reason why the option 3 is so much more expensive is because you're going to the new site and you're not able to utilize all the existing infrastructure that you do have. So option 1 would get you additional capacity because right now, like I mentioned, you're limited by peak flows. So you can only take so much more additional peak flow through the plant, but you're going to run into an issue where you're not able to pump it through the plant, and then you could end up with issues like sewer backups because you're just not able to move the flow through the plant fast enough. You can treat it once you get it pumped into the plant, but that's where the bottleneck is right now, right that front end of the plant where you're doing your screening and your influent pumping. So phase 1 is a little bit up for staff input as far as what they feel the most urgent needs are, but one thing that we definitely need to do in phase 1 is the pumping and screening improvements, and so that does get you additional capacity. And then in phase 2, we would look at things like the routing of the effluent to the Crawfish River at that time, if that's something that the city wants to proceed with, and biosolids upgrades to continue to get you even more capacity. And ultimately, what phase 1 and 2 would be designed to accommodate is the 20-year flow and load projections. So DNR has a requirement that we need to design any upgrades to the 20-year flow and load projections. And they actually don't allow you to plan for less than that or more than that. You're kind of locked in at that 20 years. So when you combine phase 1 and 2, that would get you capacity through 20 years from now, barring some, extraordinary change such as a large industry coming in. But we would work with the city and look at your growth, look at Department of Administration projections, look at any known industries or commercial entities are coming in. That's kind of the first step that we would start as soon as you give the go-ahead for facility planning, as we would start to really carefully look at those projections for 20-year flow and loads, so we know exactly what we need to design for that phase 1 and phase 2.
Thank you, and I apologize, I didn't introduce you by your full name earlier, Travis Anderson. So thanks for being here. And if I would, maybe just to add to the issue that Mary raised, I think on slide number 6 from your slide deck from December has a chart that describes generally the work that would be done in phase 1 and the work that would be done in phase 2. So the influent pumping, headworks, upgrade, ditches, clarifier, that's all kind of dealing more with the volume, it sounds like, of flow. And then phase 2 is dealing more with the contaminants and the treatment and so forth.
Yes, yep.
I would clarify that regardless of which option you select tonight, that's only to begin the facility planning process with DNR. It will still come back to Public Works Board and the City Council for authorization to bid the project, which would include the full scope of work that's being proposed and any benefits, the benefits and costs associated with that, as well as award of the project. So this is a necessary step in the DNR's approval process, but this is not the last time that you'll have the opportunity to make value judgments or design choices, or whether you want to expedite a certain improvement or something like that. There will be other opportunities for it. But in general, I think what Travis is getting to is phase 1 is intended to solve our immediate problem, which is flow through the plant. AGS is still identified as the future of staying at the existing plant, simply because you'd want a smaller footprint product in order to maximize the space you have on the existing site. If you stayed with an oxidation ditch system, you really only have room for one more, maybe more, if we built into the soon-to-be decommissioned substation next to it. So you could do that, but you're running more of a risk that you'll run out of capacity by sticking with that. But our immediate concern does not necessitate the transition to a new technology. Phase 2 will be driven by both city council priority as well as growth and demand on the system. So the phase 1 will be addressing the immediate needs of compliance with regulations as well as the deficiencies in our wastewater treatment plant. And phase 2, when it becomes necessary, would be when we potentially transition to a new treatment technology in order to take advantage of a smaller footprint option. I hope that helps.
I have an additional comment to what Mr. Daly was saying, is that if you go back to the February 15th, 2022 meeting that we had, and I know, Mary, you weren't on board yet, so I don't blame you. I think, Travis, you made this one as well, this other presentation in 2022, does a really good job of breaking down the information. Obviously, knowing that the prices are 2 years old, so there's going to be probably a bump in those costs, just a little, right? Not too bad. But what I was finding was, I went and looked at the other one that we just saw in December, but I wanted to see way back in 2022, when we agreed that we should go with option 3, but that was before we knew that we weren't going to get any grants. Why did we decide that, and what information did we have to look at? So I would highly recommend looking at that PowerPoint presentation. I think it's really informative, aside from the prices.
There was a large facility that staff visited as well, in addition to the Rockford trip. Do you recall where that was?
Yes.
Kansas City?
Yeah, we went out to Kansas City to look at AGS installation that was up and running, and operations staff there had nothing but good things to say about it. The process was working very well. Bill Kiesling joined us on that site visit.
I guess what I'm still trying to understand, and I apologize for my confusion, but the rate impact comparison is, we had a brief discussion about that back in December regarding just the magnitude of the two different options.
Yeah.
And it has phase one and phase two. So, but when the chart that is noted, as Lisa had mentioned on page 6, actually has it breaking down. Phase one is 19 million, phase two is 17 million. And so is this phase one, we start paying for phase one, and then in I'm making this up, 2032, where we have now a 4% utility increase, that starts phase two costs? Or is this all, when we go with phase one, we are automatically assuming phase two? And so we're really deciding on both the 19th and the 17th, that when you start one, you have to do second. I'm just really trying to understand the money part and what we get for this comparison. Because this doesn't have inflation, so when you actually have inflation, the new gets really high fast, because it's higher and it loads early. And so I'm just trying to understand what we get for what the rate payers impact with the phases, because the way it's written here, it's an and I'm seeing this as kind of implying an or. So if I could just please help me understand that a little bit.
Yeah, the rate, the preliminary rate evaluation that was included in the slides includes the cost for both phase one and phase two.
Okay.
But it assumes that phase two is 10 years from now. So that's why you don't have to do the big rate increase all at once. You're not doing the rate increase for phase two until 10 years from now.
Okay.
Yeah, so the rate increases gradually over time to avoid the
Yep.
spike.
And I think what I heard both of you say in different ways is that phase two, 10 years is just one estimate. It may be 8 years, it may be 12 years. It kind of depends on city growth and possible changes in regulations and other things like that. So
yes.
we'd have to be monitoring that.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got a couple questions for you. You mentioned the multi-discharge variance, and I think I had run across something, and maybe it was a League of Wisconsin Municipalities newsletter somewhere recently, that they're talking about that at the legislature. And I don't know if there's any news that you can share about that, but maybe just to clarify, when you said earlier that multi-discharge variance that the city has will buy us a couple permit terms. If memory serves, a permit term is 5 years, right? So that's maybe like a 10-year, 10 years before we would need to meet the new phosphorus rules?
Yes, you get 3 permit terms under the variance, and then you have to start the process of final compliance. And the city, I believe, is 2 years into the first permit term.
Okay.
So roughly 13 years from now, you'll have to have made a decision and have started the process of final compliance, whether that's filtration, whether that's pumping to the Crawfish River. We don't need to have that decided right this minute. And the variance is up for renewal by EPA in 2027, and the initial discussion is positive that will be renewed. The DNR has made a very compelling case to the EPA that this program needs to continue, or there'll be widespread economic harm to the state. So I would envision that program continues, and you would have those additional permit terms for phosphorus compliance.
Okay, and it sounds like that if we would go with upgrades at the existing plant, that timing is sort of around that range of time period where we'd be looking at our phase two
Yes.
improvements anyway. So
Yep.
they might kind of line up.
And our requirements for improved flow are distinct from compliance with phosphorus. So that's why you see that we're looking to do some work soon, and not just wait until, year 13 when we have to comply with phosphorus, because there's
Right.
other operational needs at the plant that necessitate work for other deficiencies other than phosphorus removal.
On the other option of building a new wastewater treatment plant, I believe, and it just, if you could just refresh our memory, the plan would be to discharge to the Crawfish River at that point, because we can take advantage of a different dilution to meet the phosphorus standards, but we would be subject to some newer standards that we're not currently required to meet. Am I remembering that right?
In general, discharging to the Crawfish River is still going to have limits that are less strict than what you have now. It's just, there were some new rules that were changed by DNR, and it wasn't quite as good as what they originally told us. So it's still a benefit, it's just not as good as what we thought it was going to be. So that's just one of those instances of these regulations are always getting more strict, they're never getting more relaxed. And that's why I think regardless of you know, what you decide tonight, I think that's why I don't think you have to make a definitive decision on we're going to discharge to the Crawfish River in 10 years, because maybe 8 years from now you look at it and it's not a very good deal anymore and you should just continue to discharge where you're at. Or maybe the reverse happens. Maybe in 8 years the limits for the creek are just going to be completely prohibitive and it's a no-brainer, the Crawfish. It could go either way.
Thank you.
Or there could be new removal technology that allows us to filter it out prior to
Yep.
releasing it into the waterway.
Yeah. Looking at the two task orders, another question that I had on the task order for the new wastewater treatment plant, that includes a cost-benefit analysis. And this is also something I seem to recall from a few years back, that we had to really make the case to DNR that building a new plant would, meet that sort of cost-benefit analysis standard that they use. But I don't see that we have to do that for the existing site. That's just sort of the nature of the way the regulations are written. You don't have to do an analysis if you're going to expand at an existing site versus if you're going to build something new.
Yeah, that's correct. And the new site was never going to be less costly than the existing site, at least in the short term, in the planning window. If you remember, if we look out way out there, then the costs narrow, but it had to be within a certain boundary. It couldn't be like wildly more expensive. So that's why we, if you pick the new site, we would have to revisit that analysis, especially now that costs have changed so much, to get approval from DNR that it's within a certain boundary.
Thank you, and I think on that one table on slide 6, at least from back in December, the cost projections had gone up more for, relatively speaking, more for the new plant than for improving the existing plant. So some of those construction costs seem to be coming into play too.
Yeah, I think generally as a percent increase, they're pretty similar, but when you do a percent increase on a larger number, the overall magnitude of the number is bigger, so I think that's what you're seeing there.
Okay, thanks.
There's also other things that we can use at the existing plant that inflation isn't affecting.
Okay.
So a new plant, you need everything. The existing plant, while much of it has aged out, not all of it, some of it will continue to last for, years and years and years. So that plays into it as well.
Okay. Greg, Steve, yeah.
Mrs. Curler?
Yeah.
If we do decide to move forward with the phasing of the existing site, are we basically overturning our motion back from February 22nd when we had a motion to move forward with the new facility?
I believe the current resolution would trump the previous action.
So whatever we decide tonight on the current resolution, if it's different than what we did in 2022, tonight's decision would be what the staff would be following.
Correct. The way I would phrase it is you've been presented with updated and new information and can therefore take new action based on that.
Anything else, Steve?
Nope, that's it.
Craig?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I have an opinion and thoughts on the topic,
All
of
right,
course.
let me just
so.
check, does anybody else have any further questions for Travis or for staff? I guess I'll ask one, this is minor, but it looked like the task orders were prepared a few weeks ago and had some timelines that you could meet. Are those still achievable, even though, a little bit of time has passed, or do you need to update those? When you would be able to complete each task order for us?
Are you referring to the schedule that's in the task order?
Right, yes.
Yeah, those are still accurate.
Okay. Okay, sounds good.
The only thing I would mention is in consideration of it, I know it's come up before, the pros and cons of which one to do. And obviously the main benefit of remaining at the existing site is the ability to phase in improvements and have a less stark rate impact on the existing ratepayers that you have now. A new site does provide the city with the most operational flexibility. It provides the most flexibility to accommodate anything that happens to the future. And since you're building it all at once, you are protecting yourself against potential increases of significant inflation over those next 10 years before we get to phase two. So you're paying a premium today. Essentially, you're buying down your risk, I guess is how I would call it. You're buying down your risk that either you will outgrow the existing site or that the costs over the next 10 years will have, if you looked back 10 years ago, you say, well, maybe we should have built on a greenfield site and done something new. So that's what your risk tolerance is, what your tolerance is for the significant rate increase all at once that ratepayers would have to absorb versus the certainty that building on a greenfield site grants you. That's the best way I can kind of lay out the decision point for you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Travis or staff? All right, well, Greg, would you like to kick off some comments then? Discussion?
Sure, I'll kick off comments. I guess I've had the honor to be on Public Works for the last couple of years, so I've heard a lot of this in depth over that time period, and I know Mary has been on Public Works for much of that time as well. For me, it comes down to a cost is a big issue. Comparing the existing site to a new site, the residents, for each house, you're looking at saving over $10,000 over the next 16 years. That's huge. I mean, that's $53 a month when you calculate it out that way. So that really hits home. When you look at the new site, your rates will increase. It'll go over triple in the next 5 years. If we go with the upgraded version on the existing site, you're going to see about a 66% increase based on our calculations. So that's still significant, but it's not triple, of course. When you look at our capacity, the diagram from December 24 is showing a capacity up to 30,000 in population. I don't think we hit 30,000 in Lake Mills for at least the next 100 years, to be honest with you. I mean, it took 189 years to get to 6,500 people in Lake Mills. If we continue to grow like we have over the last 35 years, that's a 55% growth rate. In 100 years, we'll be at a population of around 24,000. So I think it'll take a while to get to 30,000. For me, if we build a new site, to me, it seems like that's putting a burden on the current residents here in Lake Mills. You got 6,500 people that are building a site that we really don't need until we get to around 30,000 people 100 years from now. It just doesn't make sense. I think it makes a lot more sense to go with the existing site. We have some new technology we can implement over time with the AGS technology. And to me, it just seems like a no-brainer. That's the way we should go with the existing site based on our current numbers and technology. And I'm sure technology will probably change in the next 30, 70, 100 years. When you see how technology's changed in the last 35 years, there's going to be a lot happening in the waste area. So that's where I'm at with the existing site.
Thanks, Greg. Anybody else want to make comments or discussion?
I have a quick
Yeah,
question. With the expansion of the existing site, I can see that it kind of starts to encroach on the people's backyards. Have we, I mean, is that at the property line? I just want to make sure that they're not necessarily losing property.
So in these initial phases, there wouldn't be any need to encroach on their property. We are already within the setback boundary that's dictated by DNR, but DNR has said that the city's grandfathered in. So that would not be an issue in the planning period here that we're talking about. One thing that we've also mentioned at a high level with staff is the possibility of doing some type of screening or fence or something like that, just to visually have a barrier there. So that's something that could be looked at into down the road.
Okay, thank you.
And I did think of one more question, and then I'll share some of my thoughts as well. So my question was, would it be hypothetically possible that we would get through phase one of improvements if we were to tonight approve making improvements on the existing site, that we would get through the first phase and something would happen, either a opportunity to bring a large industry into our community, or some other unexpected growth, or some change in the regulations. Would it be conceivable that we could, at some point, say 10 years from now, then decide to not stay in the existing site anymore and go to a new site at that point in time?
Yes, you could definitely do that.
And I think then that's what the sort of the risk challenge that you were talking about, Drake, where it's like, well, we might spend some money, say these first 10 years, give or take, and then circumstances change and we might make a different decision later, and that money would be sunk.
It certainly is a risk. You do potentially have other options as opposed, when considering industry. A large industry likely, requires some amount of public involvement, typically, to either incentivize their location here or make it possible for them to build. You could incorporate into some kind of public-private partnership a pre-treatment of waste that is privately owned and operated prior to entering our public system. The city would likely have to pay for that to take that cost off of the potential developer. But an option would exist to potentially explore, if it was going to place a burden on the existing system, but there was a desire by both parties for the location to be here, to work with them on a pre-treatment process before it entered our system in order to reduce the burden on the public system.
And that example would be an alternative to having to build a new plant, I think is what you're
Right.
saying. Okay.
I mean, for example, in a previous community I worked in New Glarus, all New Glarus Brewery from the Hilltop Brewery, wastewater was pre-treated before it entered the public system. which was a significant cost to the developer. The owners, there was village involvement there, but also reduced the burden greatly on the public system. So it certainly has been done.
So I guess my thoughts about this are, I think, I voted in favor of building a new plant at a new site back in 2022. And I think at that point, I felt that the costs were not that far apart from one another at that time, and that it gave us a lot of opportunities to do new things, try new things, and move the plant out of, kind of the heart of a neighborhood. I do feel that some of the new information that we've gained has shifted my thinking. To me, there are additional benefits to a new site that we haven't necessarily identified, but to your point, Greg, about population, I think we've got a good chart from Strand showing like the population equivalent of some industries. And so, to me, the positive of constructing a new plant is that our community might be more attractive to those industries. The downside of that is we have to build it up front and hope that they will come. And so that's a pretty big risk with the price tag that we're talking about here. I guess for tonight and to give, some direction to keep this project moving, I'm now more supportive of expansion at the existing site. Even though I know that there might be, as I was just asking about that, there might be some sunk costs if things change in 10 years and we decide, we maybe should now, relook at a new plant. I look at advantages of using some of the existing structure, that we do have the ability to bring in some of that newer technology on the existing site. And I look at the other big ticket items that we're continuing to talk about and work on, such as Sandy Beach, such as the library expansion, some of our street projects and reconstruction projects. So I'm as trying to balance all of that and looking at the rate impacts, I feel like it's the more fiscally responsible choice for us to vote for expansion at the existing site. Michelle?
I'll follow up with that. I too voted for the new site. But like you, I was looking at it more for what could this look like long-term, but I also recall the reason why I did was because of the possibility of additional funding to offset the cost to our constituents. With that not being possible, then we really have to look at what can we do with what we've got and what the constituents would be willing to handle. And like Greg was saying, and as a, technically would be considered a low-income household, my household would be greatly impacted by having something like that, along with all of the others. So, and I wouldn't even consider myself low income, but that's by standard low income. The current site, though it's not ideal, is what we have to work with, and I think we have to do what we can with what we work with, or what we have. And then, like you talked about, the possibility of moving in 10 years and reevaluating, I mean, yeah, that's just part of the evolution of our existence here. There's always going to be something that's going to have to be reconsidered or changed or something, just like the evolution of Sandy Beach over the last 50 years. So I anticipate that this will not be the last time we see anything about the wastewater treatment plan, and maybe Travis will be here with us 10 years from now, I don't know, but I think we should stick with where we're at and improve what we have there as best as we can to meet the needs of the community.
Steve, any thoughts that you would like to share for discussion?
I agree with what everybody is saying here. My biggest fear is, I'm kind of with Drake, is that you're basically purchasing a little bit of insurance with the new plant. You know what your fixed costs are going to be long-term. if it did happen where we had to move and do something in 10 years, we'd have the existing rate plus the rate of a new plant on top of it. And I think that would just be insurmountable for our residents. So I guess that's my biggest concern is that, regulations change or something major happens where what we think is a big increase now would look small down the road. That's my biggest fear right now. I don't want to do something twice. It's too expensive to do it twice.
That's a good point, Steve.
Mary, any thoughts?
Well, I hear Steve's risk. I know at the Public Works meeting over a multitude of months, a lot of the in-depth discussion kind of transpired along those lines. I support, though, the ratepayer impact has been a concern, especially as you look at, well, I had interest only because I was trying to really see what happens as you move things along, and it's not easy with the new wastewater treatment plant to figure out how to pass that on, given and specifically other things that are on the docket. And I think about that new big business that might come knocking on our door. I think it's in our best interest to think about what other infrastructure elements it will also be impacted, because we're looking at this as a single infrastructure improvement that is needed, but we are currently a one stoplight city. And you think about if a large employer would like to come in, it has implications on a lot of things, one of them being our wastewater. And so with all of that additional stuff that comes also additional investment. And so what we have here is this and. And so I feel where today's decision would rest on working on the current site, because it aligns, I think, with the additional commentary, but also thinking about other investments that will need to happen as we continue to grow, but as if a large employer were to come this direction, it'll impact other things as well that'll cost money. Just another little add.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think it's been a really good discussion. If anybody has any more thoughts to share, please do. Greg?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, great.
Motion to approve City Council Resolution 25-14, checking the phrase phasing improvements at the existing site, 62,500, completion September 30th, 2025.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Waters and a second by Ms. Quednow to adopt Resolution 25-14, approving the task order for improvements at the existing site. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Misty, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Fields?
No.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Travis. We talked before the meeting about this is a marathon, not a sprint, so I guess we're continuing the miles on this project, so thanks for being here, appreciate it. Okay, our next agenda item is Resolution 25-15 related to the Rock Lake Water Level Order. So Misty, would you read that title, please?
City Council Resolution 25-15, authorizing the Director of Grounds and Facilities to supplement and clarify the requested amendment to the Rock Lake water level by letter to Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
So before we have a motion, I'd like to just give a little background and then have Director Schreiner talk. I asked to have this put on the agenda. Well, originally Mary had suggested at our last meeting that we get an update, and in talking with staff, it seemed like some of the additional information that DNR is asking for in response to our request is something that the whole council should really hear and make sure it's consistent with the previous decision that we made. So that's why it's coming back to us tonight, and it's not in the form of a new resolution, but correspondence that Eric is proposing to send on our behalf as our contact person. So with that sort of background, Eric, I'll let you give the update, and what you're bringing for us tonight.
Yep, thank you much, Lisa. So when 2505 resolution passed, several days later, DNR did request for further clarification on that resolution, what the goals and intents were behind it, and then did offer a few suggestions or recommendations on how best to proceed or how to look at our actual water level order request before we proceed with it. They have been extraordinarily collaborative as we go throughout this, offering recommendations for other water level orders to look at, and that's what did prompt the change in the format and some of the language of our existing request. Aaron and Mary did substantial amounts of research as well, and there were two examples that were provided, one being Pewaukee Lake and one being Beaver Dam Lake. They did differ greatly from our existing water level order and what was actually recommended to request change within the water level order. Those are some of the two most recent water level orders that have been amended or changed by the Wisconsin DNR. So within those formats, they had a little bit less prescriptive language. Within your resolution, it listed 0.3 inches per day being able to rise throughout the spring season before you reach summer maximums. The two examples provided just a maximum water level height, basically, and a minimum, instead of having seasonal maximums and minimums. However, we do still have seasons per se when we have the dates listed within our requested water level order. So hopefully you can understand the differences between what was previous within what was requested and some of the format changes that are here. Within this, like I said, we will still have our spring allowance to raise the water level when we reach that summer maximum, and then we will still have a drawdown period, both of which will be gradual. But it is based on recommendations from the DNR to look at different examples, as well as just the clarification on what the intent was behind the requested water level order change. So my request here is to see if we can proceed with the recommended language that we've drafted, as well as making sure with what was drafted is still consistent with the existing resolution.
Thanks, Eric. And so a couple things I would highlight then for council members. So in our original resolution, 2505, there's the table, and we, historically, or in the current water level order, there's really 4 seasons. And the examples, Eric, that you were saying that DNR provided really just have a year-round minimum and maximum, and then some dates that you shift from one to the other. And
Correct.
so what you've drafted in your letter to respond to DNR's request just has a minimum and a maximum, and it doesn't have those 4 seasons, the way that we currently have it now. Am I explaining that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And so then I would also just highlight that what's in the letter for the minimum, the proposed minimum, is currently our winter maximum.
Yes.
And then the proposed maximum is the summer maximum. And the difference between those is almost exactly 10 inches. So just for people that pay
Yep,
attention
so
to
our,
that kind of thing.
our current maximums are not changing within the existing water level order at all. If you recall the passing of the dam management policy, we had that minimum and maximum that we are allowed to operate within those seasons. We are still continuing to operate at the maximum within this requested water level order change. Hopefully that provides some clarification.
And so then the other thing I would highlight, so the bullet points, and I got a chance to, Eric shared with me those, the orders that DNR had issued for these other 2 water bodies recently. And so I like how your letter basically presents these as like, these would be our proposed conditions for a water level order, that we would be asking DNR to issue. They're sort of written that way, which I think is a smart way to do it. So there's 2 bullet points in particular that talk about raising the water level and then lowering the water level, that we just want to make sure that's, consistent with what the council, the council direction. So Mary, you have studied this data for years, and I wonder if you had any thoughts or comments that you wanted to share on the letter or the process.
Well, the process, as I had shared when I presented back in January, is different, I think, than perhaps we've experienced in the past. It has been more collaborative. That was positioned when we presented the original table, so thank you, Eric, for taking on the action to draw up language consistent with what was asked, I guess, by the DNR. The original table was really intended to start the dialogue formally, and I know Drake had discussed that also, or made reference to the fact that we really didn't have any opportunity to get a conversation unless we formally had submitted. And so, although I perhaps wasn't as formal in stating that, I did mention it several times throughout the presentation regarding the fact that it started the conversation. So it was a bit surprising, I guess, quickly that a question came back regarding how to rewrite it in, I would say, the format that has been utilized at other lakes. And so the examples that were sent to Eric were actually supported by Aaron, and I think you did a great job pulling together in the framework that the other lakes have been utilized that has been supported by DNR. You did a really great job. I think what is very, you have to twist your brain around on is the min and the max. It reads, the min is really the winter. So even though we don't have seasons, if you think about the min as in the context of how you've written it is like the winter season, and when you achieve the max, you're at the summer. So the words draw you to having a min and a max, which is a little less complicated, I think, than the table where we have multiple ranges. And so I feel it's aligns, and the date, the March 25th was the average ice off here. So I know I'm certain the DNR will be looking at dates and seeing what dates might be most supported or represented for our lake, because I know you had, each lake has similar dates, but not always the exact same dates. And so it'll be interesting to see what their research and dialogue kind of presents itself for the next, outreach to Eric. But I think that you did a nice job pulling together.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Something that looks like the DNR orders that are out there.
My only question, since I've been gone, this is when the DNR contacted you, this is their preferred format for a potential change in the water level order. I'm assuming they didn't make any endorsements or guarantees or
Not at all.
that this may improve the odds of it being granted, or that this will result in an acceptance of our requested change, but that it's their preferred way to evaluate. Is that accurate?
You're correct. Yes, there was no guarantee on this passing. I do not know if these dates are going to be what is approved within the water level order. These are just what we are proposing, but you're correct. It's just the preferred format.
Great.
My main question is about the lake wildlife. That was one of the concerns that we had all along, and wanted to make sure that whatever we suggested would be a benefit or would help the wildlife in some way. Does this new language still achieve those goals? What's the thought on that?
I think it still achieves the same goals, at least in my interpretation of it, as what was previously proposed within the existing resolution. It still would definitely be up to the DNR's research and their formulation to see what would be best for the ecology within Rock Lake. That's why we include, or at least the DNR will include, wildlife biologist, fisheries biologist, ecologists within this to figure out if those prescribed dates or those proposed dates are correct and will be best for the habitat. So this is where basically the area experts will be weighing in on their opinion of these dates, and their recommendations is what is going to dictate our water level order changing of those dates. So we are relying on the expertise of the DNR to make sure that our water level order will be good for the ecology of the lake.
Staff has avoided to date offering the city council an opinion on what the ideal water levels at any given time during the year may be. The action the city council has taken is a suggestion of what they could be based off of resident feedback that you've received, feedback on experiences on the lake over several times, an evaluation of some data of water levels over time. But ultimately, the evaluation of what's best for the economy, the ecology, all of those considerations, it is the the duty and obligation of the DNR to perform that level of analysis. And so I would assume that they would not approve something that would be of significant detriment to the ecology of the lake. And so they have to balance recreation, economy, ecology, and all of those things when determining what they're going to do. But that analysis is not something that your city staff has done to date. We have mostly been, what I can tell you is that based on what you're submitting, if you approve this and everything you've done to date, we're capable of operating the dam in order to achieve those ends. Whether the DNR determines what's best for the lake, we can't offer you assistance at that level of analysis.
Well, and I think that reminds me some of the meetings of the Joint Rock Lake Committee when they were working on making recommendations to us a couple of years ago, and they're like, if we just knew what DNR would approve, then we could, make a recommendation, so it's a sort of a little bit of a chicken and an egg. I think we have gotten some preliminary early feedback, definitely about the fall, that they're going to be concerned about when the water gets to that minimum or that, that winter level. So we've submitted this, we've taken the risk that they're going to, give us a different date than what we asked for. When I think what I liked about the original proposal, and I think, the letter accomplishes this too with one suggestion that I'll make, is that I think the way that we're honoring the feedback from the waterfront property owners is we're trying to retain that summer recreational time period of May 2nd to September 16th. And as the dam operator, the city is trying to get some transition periods that are approved and that are clear and that everybody can understand. And so then there's no disputing, whether the city's doing it correctly or not. So I feel like that's something that we are still preserving and assuming that those transitions can be done without the impacts to wildlife or other kinds of, fisheries or other kinds of habitat. Hopefully that will be approved. One thing I did have a question about, Eric, so in the bullet points that you have proposed to DNR, and it's the third from the last, the one that talks about raising the water level, and it says can be accomplished within 2 weeks of ice out or by April 15th, but such seasonal water level raising shall not start prior to March 25th. That sounds like that's saying that we're requesting the water level to be raised in the spring to the maximum by April 15th. And I think our current resolution sticks with the May 2nd. So I just wanted to double check if that was what you were intending to shift that, or if that was just a typo. And so I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you were proposing.
Looking at it a little bit closer, we have ice out conditions that are listed there. Ice out is a variable date. That can be anything really depending on the conditions. This means that by April 15th, that is when we begin raising to reach our May 2nd or our summer maximum water levels. So that means our spring transition period would begin on April 15th at the latest. Is that clear?
What you said is clear, but that's not how I read that sentence, and so then so that's why I'm having a little heartburn. Like, I feel like if instead of April 15th, it said May 2nd, then I think that would match, the resolution that we adopted. Another way, that we could approach this, and I had mentioned it last time, but I didn't, when we adopted the resolution, but I didn't bring an amendment forward on it, is we could just do a 2-week time period before May 2nd, just like we're doing in the fall. And that's like a 3.5-week time period, but we could just say, the water level shall be raised beginning on April 16th to achieve the maximum by May 2nd. And that would be a simpler way of, I could elaborate on that a little bit, but that might be a simpler way of saying that bullet point that just sets, here's a time frame that we want. And again, DNR may or may not support that, but it's that transition period. And I went back and looked, and this is exactly what Rock Lake Improvement Association had recommended to us a couple years ago, was start the transition on April 16th, and then you've got, roughly 15-day period where you're starting to raise the water level. So ideally, you hit the summer water level by May 2nd.
So it does say further down, to reach summer maximum allowed water levels by or near the May 1st effective date. That's towards the bottom of of Eric's memo.
Yeah. Right. But so that's not, what's in the paragraph and what's in the bullet point don't match. And so that's why I was trying to just make sure, if the bullet point is what we're saying, that's what we are proposing that our permit conditions would read. I think we want to be precise about it. So, I mean, an easy way to do it would be to say in that bullet point to change April 15th to May 2nd.
Both of them May 2nd?
I think both of them should be May 2nd because that's what's in our resolution. It was May 2nd to September 15th was our, sort of our summer level.
So would you remove
Resolution.
then the within 2 weeks of ice out and just say the water can be reasonably accomplished following ice out conditions by May 2nd?
And what I heard is that you actually propose starting on a date set rather than even investigating ice
I
out
think you could do
conditions.
either way. I mean, and Eric, you and I have talked about this. I mean, from a operational perspective, in terms of operating the dam, how would they be different if you're raising the water level based on ice out or based on a date certain?
So ice out is a declared date, and that's recognized by the DNR that, let's say, March 27th is the declared ice out date. At that point, we would begin operating in spring levels during that transition period. That does require human intervention to do that. It is simply pushing a theoretical button. It is within the user interface of the actual dam itself, but we would transition from our winter period, therefore, into our spring period. If we were to set a date, it would automatically do that. It knows what date it is, it knows what time it is. It would just transition into that spring period automatically, both of which can be implemented and done from an operator standpoint.
So let's say hypothetically, we do it based on the ice out, no later, not starting prior to March 25th. So we have an early ice out year, and you flip that switch, and it starts raising the water level on March 25th. Are you going to have people calling you that want, okay, now ice is out, so let's get it up to the max before May 2nd? That's the one thing I worry about with, every year obviously is going to be different, but people will maybe have that expectation. And I just want to make sure that whatever we're asking for, it's going to be really clear so that hopefully you're not still getting, people calling with their preferences, I guess.
I think that's an inevitable aspect of this. I think the expectations or managing those expectations may be difficult. It's extremely dependent on the season, how fast that water level is going to raise, and it's a difficult thing to manage. I really can't offer a good solution or a good recommendation on how to remedy that. I just think it's attempting to manage those, and I think the best way to do that is by making it clear. So I'm up for any recommended language changes in here to make it as clear as possible.
Well, I guess I would like to propose a replacement bullet point there that I think would be clearer. And I guess it's sort of an amendment, I guess, to the letter. I don't know what we're
letter,
doing
not
as
to-
far as the process, not to the resolution, but sort of amendment
If
to
you
the
all
letter.
agree to an exchange of a bullet point, I don't think that there's necessarily a process there.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure that, the council is in support of it. So I would propose an alternate bullet point that would read, "The water level of Rock Lake shall be raised beginning on April 16th to achieve a water level as near the maximum water level that can reasonably be accomplished by May 2nd."
So the only thing based on my analysis that is it kind of is, that there's like, they nearly have 2 weeks to start going up to May 1st, and we have missed like a lot of the early spring rains are prior to April 16th. And so does that help us to achieve a better transition to try to get to summer max? That's a concern just on the 2-week window.
And
And
let me
right
just
now,
ask-
so
okay.
that's just, and so I'm just supporting an ice-off, I guess an ice-off approach or an ice-off, close to ice-off, and that might not be cohesive with the dam. But that's the only thing that'd help us that would make an improvement, because right now we aren't starting necessarily to May 1st. That moves us up 2 weeks, but the data would suggest that the raising had been occurring more, and I would say April 1st, which is 2 weeks post ice off on average, which is the 2 weeks post ice off. And so you start the April 1st, no later than the 15th. So that's where it gets, I see your point of wanting clarification, Lisa, because the dates would possibly make it more confusing, maybe the way it's written. Although this is consistent with how the other orders are written, which is
That is-
interesting.
yep,
These
that is correct.
This is exactly how they're written, yeah.
I mean, I guess an alternate, and again, I was sort of going based on Rock Lake Improvement Association's proposal, and they had done some precipitation analysis. Now, maybe there's, you've been looking at lots and lots of data, so maybe there's more data there. And like you said, Eric, I mean, every year's different. When it's ice off, you could have early ice off and no rain. You could have late ice off and lots of rain. And so, every year it's going to really be variable. I just want to make sure that we get a transition that DNR approves and everyone understands, so that it's clear and easy for you to operate. Do you think, I don't know, we could ask for more than 2 weeks? I mean, that would be another way of going about it. April 1, April 10th, I don't really know how to choose a date, I guess.
If you chose April 1st, it would give you a couple extra weeks, but then at the same time, you wouldn't have the variable date with ice-off dates that you would
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
It's just a recommendation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm trying to remember which one that you shared with me. Pewaukee Lake, I think, was maybe April 1st to April 15th, so they were getting to their max a couple weeks
Faster.
earlier, yeah.
Earlier and faster, they were trying to pull it up earlier, like
Yeah.
ours. Our
And that's a
second
bigger
is-
lake, too.
Yeah. I would support April 1st if we want, I don't have my, like a spreadsheet for me, but looking at my graph.
And I guess all of this, we're all understanding DNR could
Oh, they have.
say
it.
no or change the dates or whatever, but we're trying to make sure that they understand what we're trying to accomplish and what our intention is. So you're thinking maybe go with April 1st, like starting April 1st? That would be the
If you would
rise?
support that, I mean, to try to make it more clear. That
Well, like
rather
I
than
said,
using 2 weeks post ice off, which
Yeah.
could vary, I don't know, this year we might be ice off. We've got a lot of rain today. I don't know, we had a lot of ice. I don't know what everyone, do you guys do a pool on ice off? Everybody kind of try to get a pool on
Somebody
ice. Kind of like-
does.
Somebody must have one.
We just do
Usually
a
right
pool
So
on
I
when the
think
first,
April 1st is.
when the first
would be
question is
something
for
I
ice rinks.
think would provide us adequate time to capture April precipitation and runoff.
And
to
I
get up to
think,
May
I'm just
2nd.
trying to remember some of the stuff I was reading this afternoon. I think there have been prior years where ice-off wasn't until April, but in recent years, I think like April 2nd was one of the latest ones. So, okay, so then the replacement bullet would read, "The water level of Rock Lake shall be raised beginning on April 1st to achieve a water level as near the maximum water level that can be reasonably accomplished by May 2nd."
I would support that that gives us extra time to bring the level up, as long as it, of course, gets DNR approval because
Well,
of
and-
the wildlife,
and they-
but yeah.
Absolutely. And I know they are looking at inundation mapping and other factors still, so they have work they're doing to assess our dates, I'm sure, from their perspective.
Yeah, I would think that wetland study and the inundation
Map
is
and-
going to help them decide whether they're going to give us April 1 or April 16th or
Or-
something else.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Michelle, Steve, do you have any thoughts on that replacement bullet point or a date to start?
No.
No opinion? Steve, any thoughts?
I like the April 1st, just to give us more time to collect water and get the lake level up where we need to.
Okay. So
Why don't-
process-wise, do we
because-
need to?
Let's just discuss it for a second. Because there's that previous resolution that is, I believe it's more ambiguous than what you just brought up. Why don't you motion to amend the proposed letter with that in mind and just explicitly state that April 1st date? We all heard it, we understand it. Formalize that by the motion and then take a subsequent vote on the adoption of the resolution allowing for the letter to be sent.
I misunderstood one
Yep.
thing you said, a further step to vote on the resolution?
The subsequent resolution, I want some formality with regard to the letter and your suggestion right now. Since that document was prepared in accordance with what the staff interpreted the previous resolution, 2505, as stating, why don't you motion to amend that letter, just so we formalize that through a process? And then once that's approved, you have the letter, and now you can adopt the resolution today to send that letter, to authorize sending of that specific
Oh, got it,
letter.
got it. Okay, today's resolution.
We don't have
Okay.
a written motion for that action,
Got
but
it.
doing
Yep.
that motion on
Got it.
verbally is appropriate.
Okay, so I will make a motion to revise the 1, 2,
Water
3,
level
4,
order.
5, 6, the sixth bullet point in the draft letter to replace the sixth bullet point with the following. The water level of Rock Lake shall be raised beginning on April 1st to achieve a water level as near the maximum water level that can be reasonably accomplished by May 2nd.
So you're not going to mention anything about ice out?
Right.
Okay. Second?
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the letter by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Waters. Any further discussion? So then we vote on that motion. Okay, so Misty, can you call the roll on that motion?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and I would note there's a couple of typos in the last, in the paragraph below the bullet point, so maybe just do a spell check before you send the letter out.
We will clean it up.
Okay, so I don't think we have a motion on the table for Resolution 2515 yet,
Is there
do
any
we?
more discussion?
Yeah, is there any more discussion? Or we can discuss after someone makes a motion too.
I will move to approve City Council Resolution 25-15, authorizing the Director of Grounds and Facilities to supplement and clarify the requested amendment to the Rock Lake water level by letter to Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
Second?
So we have a motion by Ms. Schmager and a second by Mr. Waters to approve Resolution 25-15. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, can we have a roll call on Resolution 25-15?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Eric, for bringing this back and for being our liaison with DNR, and hopefully this clarification will help them get on their way in evaluating our request.
I have been told that we shouldn't be surprised if it's a 6 to 9 month review process. I don't want the council to think there is no statutory required deadline for them to get through a process such as this. They've told us that they'll act as quickly as possible and reasonable. But we're probably looking at months and not weeks as far as a final determination.
I think that's a good heads up, and especially if people are thinking that we might have a different dam operation this spring. You know, that's probably not likely to have a final answer from DNR for this spring, so.
We'll still ask you every meeting.
We'll still, yes, you're always welcome to come, Eric, and give updates if you hear anything. If we don't, others will, I'm sure. Okay, our last item, and thank you to our zoning administrator and Mr. Schultz for their patience. Our last item is ordinance 1273, which is a zoning amendment. So Misty, can you read that title for us?
City Council Ordinance 1273, amending City of Lake Mills Ordinance, Section 660-44, Sub A, official zoning map, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel identification number 246-0713-1232-095, petitioner owner Joshua Schultz and Jeremy Furch, 120 East Pine Street, Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Thank you. So this is a first reading for this zoning amendment, but I think what we typically do with these is have our zoning administrator just give an overview, see if anybody has any questions. We also have the property owner, Josh Schultz is here this evening if anyone has any questions for him. So Troy, do you want to just give us a little overview?
Sure. Good evening, Council. This property was obtained by Josh in late November, knowing full well it was a multifamily, and quickly got us some plans for a 3-unit building there. The weather cooperated, so he was going to get going in December, and once he got out there and started staking things out and observing the property, he wasn't happy with having to remove some trees on the far west side of the property. Had asked me to come out there and take a look at it with him to go over the options. The options were to obviously make the unit that he had designed smaller to fit in there to avoid cutting trees. It wasn't the best idea that he had. He wasn't crazy about that, making that smaller, I guess. And then we went over the options. We looked at the future land use map and saw that it was zoned R14, single family. He kind of put pencil to paper to see if he could still make that work, and came back shortly thereafter and asked to do a rezone to an R14, and was going to pursue putting a single family home on that property. Staff is all for it. It's probably a better fit there next to the school, having a single family versus a 3-family there. It was really maxing out that parcel with all the setbacks to try to shoehorn in a three-unit apartment in there. So for sure, we are condoning something like that. I guess I will add here that the petitioner had asked to maybe waive the 3 readings and go ahead and push to get this zoned quicker. I know that's not a popular route here usually, but the instances that I can think of that maybe might persuade that is, we didn't have any resistance at the public hearing. Doesn't appear that we have any this evening. The job already is under construction. He had already started with the early start permit with the 3 units, so there's equipment on there, there's soil disturbed, might speed up the process for the area, the people around that area to get this project done a month earlier versus waiting the full 3 readings. So that's where I'll leave it if you got any questions.
Thank you, Troy, and I'll just reiterate, there was no public comment during the public hearing at Plan Commission last week, and the Plan Commission was unanimous in support of it because it is consistent with the future land use map.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
I'm normally the stickler on the 3 readings. I would be good with 2 readings, so I would be in favor of doing just the 2. And I know we would have to excuse 1 reading, but that would give us the ability to approve it at our next meeting and give the public a chance to comment at our next meeting.
Can I ask a question? So the old land use map had it as ag vacant, and the new land use map has it as R14. So how did it get zoned I just need a little history lesson, R312? Because when I went on, and it's inconsistent, the GIS map and Lake Mills GIS map isn't consistent with the future land use plan because many of the parcels around it are R312, although they look like they're R14. So can you give me just a little history? Because I found that to be curious on, it was just caught me by surprise, frankly.
Because of the area, this parcel was actually cut off of the corner parcel. There's the big
Okay.
house on the corner of Main and Pine Street, the south and east corner. The back parcel, that is the subject parcel, was cut off of that. Prior to that action in some road work, some maintenance work that was done on Pine Street, with an expectation that that step might happen because of that size of the original lot, it was stubbed out for a service. At that point in time, that entire area on the future land use map was dictated to be either commercial or R312 because of its location, that far north on Main Street and that close to the commercial corridor that is Highway V. So for future land use map designation, it was identified as R312 at one point. I believe after it was cut off, and just because of the size of it and everything, I believe it reverted actually to R14 at that time, because it just doesn't have the same size as like the multifamily structure that's immediately north of it across the street. So it maintained its previous designation in the process of it being cut off of that original lot. And now he's trying to do something that's really in accordance with the current future land use map, going to R14 to build out an appropriate dwelling on the site.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I was
There were a
just, I was
number
just
of
curious
steps.
how, I wasn't sure, I'm thinking, gosh, do I have the wrong source of record? Because I have three different colors, if you will, three different zoning.
It's specific to this lot. This lot was big, and there's that big carriage house on the far east side of it. When the longtime owners sold that property, this was an action that the subsequent owner immediately took. I want to cut off a saleable lot there. And then they sold off the parent parcel house and then just maintained this. Mr. Furch and Mr. Schultz acquired this for development purposes, and now they're kind of figuring out what they ultimately could do with it in compliance with all of the planning documents and its current zoning. So I think that's about as much history as I can personally remember on the parcel itself. What I would say is that the future land use map does say R14 at this point for the parcel. That was adopted in the most recent comprehensive plan. I personally think this use on that site makes an awful lot of sense based on the size constraints and the other considerations that were brought up. So I think that's kind of the best that I have right now.
Thanks.
Greg, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to waive the second reading on ordinance 1273, making the third reading March 18th, which is our next meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote on the motion to waive the second reading of ordinance 1273?
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. So 2 more weeks. All right, that's the end of our council business for this evening. So our last item is recommendations for future agendas. So it's ordinance 1273 will be on there. We do have a Sandy Beach work session in 2 days.
What's the time on that?
It's scheduled for 5:30. Right now, Misty is planning to provide beverages. I guess Mr. Schreiner said he's heard from a number of people who may be in attendance in the audience. So eat beforehand or bring snacks that you can enjoy subtly while we're working. But there is an agenda and documents to review for our discussion on Thursday. Anything for our next meeting that we know of?
I would invite people to email me on their correspondence on Sandy Beach, what their thoughts are. I'd like to hear from the public over the next 2 days. That would be great. So you can go to the city website and look up Greg Waters' email and send me your comments. Thank you.
Go to the news site, yes. And I think all of us would
Yes.
certainly welcome those comments. And I know I got a few before our December planned work session, and then we had to schedule that. But a work session does not involve public comment, so if you have some thoughts you want to share with us beforehand, definitely, please do that. Yeah, Michelle?
I would like to know an update on the remodeling status of Cottage Inn.
Oh,
Bayberry.
yeah, Bayberry?
Bayberry,
The
yes.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Status on the Bayberry?
We will be adding the manager performance process handbook update, so Dan and I have, I
Fantastic.
think, reconciled the changes for that, so that'll be on the next agenda.
So for March 18th?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I did see Steve had his hand up.
Yeah, Steve?
Nope, I was gonna say the same thing about the Bayberry update, because I believe we're just coming up on the 1 year mark.
Great minds think alike, Steve.
I like it.
And Steve is counting down,
Yeah.
so he's only got a couple more meetings with us, so. Okay, anything else for future agenda items? All right, if not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.